At the end of the day, this guy right here did a wonderful job. I tell you, knocking out Madeleine Ankalaev, right? I thought Ankalaev was gonna do better. I thought Ankalaev was gonna bring the fight to him, but man, Alex Pereira started out fast, started out quick, and TKO'd Ankalaev. Um, Remember they fought before, and Ankalaev controlled the fight and took him down, and wrestled him and won on decision. Even Alex said he didn't feel like even Alex said the first time they fought, he didn't feel himself. I believe that. Sometimes as fighters, we could train all we want. We could train hard and long and this and that. But come fight night, come fight day, if you're not feeling a certain, if you're feeling, you could be off. Okay, it happened to me a couple times before when I was about to fight. Sometimes, some days I just feel off on fight day. Sometimes I feel tired. I won't say tired, fatigued. Sometimes, I want to know when. And on fight day, my issue was I didn't know when should I have my last meal. My last meal. I don't know. That was always a thing because I don't want to eat a whole meal right before a fight, but I don't want to not go the whole day fight eating. So for me, so Alex Pereira said in the first fight he was off. That's why he lost the first fight against Ankalaev. But he came back strong. And I'm sorry, I was very impressed. I was very impressed by what Alex did. You know, the way he attacked Ankalaev like that, he brought the fight to him. The first time they fought, Ankalaev pushed Alex back, but Alex said no, no. So that was very good. What does the UFC go from here? Because UFC just signed a big deal with Paramount worth $7.7 billion, and my question is, are the players going to see some of that money? What's next for the UFC? Because there's no more pay per view. Okay, which is a good thing. But but are the UFC gonna pay the fighters more? What does the UFC go from here? Because UFC doesn't have any more pay per views. That's gonna end. So they just signed a huge deal. I think the fighters should get double pay. Whatever their pay is right now, UFC should just double it for everybody. Because let's face it, they can afford it. All right, how much? I know the UFC is great promotion. They're the best at it. Blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, that it's the fighters that actually put their life on the line for us. So the fighters should be compensated accordingly, right? Um, when it comes to the UFC though, and Dana White is doing a lot of boxing promotion now. He teamed up with Turkey Alashich. I think I said the name correctly. And he's Dana White, has a new partner, you know, and I think Dana White wants to do like a boxing contender series type of stuff. And Eddie Hearn is a well-known promoter in the UK, right? And him and Dana are, I don't want to say friends, but nice to each other. But Eddie Hearn isn't so sure that Dana White could just come in and just take over boxing like that. You know, UFC is a big global brand. Dana White and the Fertitta brothers at the beginning did a wonderful job building up the UFC. So I got to give him credit for that. I met Dana White one time. What I'm saying, he was nice to me, but that was a long time ago. And Dana White is trying to venture into boxing. Dana White, just so you know, Dana White's first love was boxing. I hope you know that. He used to be an amateur boxer. So his first love was boxing. So that's why he's going back to boxing again because he wants to desperately become a boxing promoter. UFC kind of fell into his lap, you could say. All right. So now what's next for the UFC? Because they signed a big deal with Paramount worth $7.7 billion, I believe. And my question is UFC gonna pay the fighters double their pay? I think the fighters should get paid double. You know what I'm saying? For what they're getting now. Because remember, UFC fighters are not allowed to have sponsors. Well, let me correct that. UFC fighters can have sponsors, but they're not allowed to talk or wear the sponsor stuff during fight week or whatever. So basically, it's like having no sponsor. And that part, I never. How did they get away with that? You know, because a lot of fighters were making money with sponsors, but the UFC said no more sponsors. Well, again, you can have sponsors, but you just can't show them or talk about them during fight week or during fight time. That defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Um, and so the sponsors, so UFC has a sponsor for all the fighters, one sponsor, and they get paid depending on the experience level in the UFC, this and that. But the problem is, $5,000 if you're a new fighter. Look, you can make a lot more money with sponsors than what UFC's paying for their sponsors paying them. So there's some parts about the UFC that I definitely don't agree with. And to me, it's all about the fighters. The fighters need to be taken care of. Period. The fighters are the ones putting their life on the line. UFC is, trust me, it's an awesome company. It's a big company. They're hard workers over there. But at the end of the day, the fighters need to get paid. UFC, Dana White is trying to get rid of the Ali Act, right? For those of y'all who don't know what the Ali Act is, basically it's an act to protect the fighters, okay? Because a lot of these fighters don't know the business side of stuff, right? So if they get with a promoter who's a dirty promoter or dirtbag promoter, they can screw over fighters, right? I'm not saying Dana White is a dirtbag. I'm just saying, some promoters can be very, very shiesty. Okay, Ali Act. Let me see. Okay, so this is the correct definition of the Ali Act, okay? The Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act is U.S. federal law passed in 2000 that protects boxers from exploitation by promoters, managers, and other industrial figures, right? Did you hear that? This is what Dana White wants to get rid of, the Ali Act. Again, it was passed in the year 2000. It protects boxers from exploitation by promoters, managers, and other industry figures. It mandates financial transparency. So what that means is that because of the Ali Act, every boxer knows how much that promotion is making that night. UFC doesn't tell their fighters that. But in the Ali Act, by law, the boxers have to know how much money that promotion is making. You see how it protects the fighters? By doing that, then the boxers get paid what they're worth. Okay. Also, whatever, it prevents conflicts of interest, like a manager also being a promoter. Exactly. Some managers can also be promoters. Okay. So it prevents conflict of interest. All right. Requires independent rankings by sanctioning bodies. That's also another thing about the Ali Act. Right. It actually requires an independent rankings by a sanctioning body. All right. Also, it empowers state commissions to enforce regulations and uphold minimum contractual standards for boxers. So the Ali Act is a wonderful thing. It protects the boxers. It protects the fighters. There isn't any Ali Act in MMA. So that's why Dana White now, because Dana White is going into the boxing realm, he wants to basically, saying, from what I heard, get rid of the Ali Act or try to modify it or something. Why is that? Why? I mean, why is he doing that? Okay, it's like, how much money do you want, Dana White? You're already close to a billionaire. Why are you trying to screw over the fighters? Allegedly, right? Because the fighters, man, fighters want to fight. All fighters want to do is fight. Fighters don't want to worry about the extra stuff. When a fighter fights, a boxer or MMA fighter, they're supposed to surround themselves with an honest team, and the promoters got to do them right. The promoters have to do the fighters right, and for whatever reason, Dana White and and you know and some other people in this field don't want to treat the fighters right. Now, again, Dana White has done a lot for the fighters too. Don't get me wrong. As far as UFC is big, compared to other promotions. Yes, MMA pays a lot compared to PFL. Obviously, compared to I'm not sure about one championship, but so yeah, I'm not saying it's all bad, but it can get better. That I would say it can get better. And my only thing is, man, it's like Dana White needs to take into consideration that you cannot go into boxing and then try to change the Ali Act or modify it. That's just not cool, right? But the UFC just signed a big deal with Paramount, and just so you know how big the deal is, I'm gonna tell you right now because let's see, UFC Paramount deal. So the deal is so the addition of Zuffa, okay, Paramount is a 7 year, $7.7 billion media rights deal. I'm gonna say it again. It's 7 year, 7.7 billion dollars media rights deal. Okay, UFC just signed that. So basically, UFC is getting in $1 billion a year for 7 years from Paramount. Can you imagine $1 billion, right? I'm not sure the whole makeup of the contract, but I'm pretty sure they can make money other ways too. That agreement announced in August about the number of UFC events. It includes 13. It includes 13 UFC events, number of UFC events, and 30 fight nights per year. Okay, and also Paramount is going to become the host of UFC's past events. So this this is crazy, y'all. This is crazy. So Zuffa, it's the UFC, just signed a 7 year, $7.7 billion deal with Paramount, right? And per year, Paramount is gonna get 13 numbered fight nights, meaning that UFC 300, something, saying three something, 13 of those and 30 fight nights, all right? And that's that's the thing. So it makes you think, right? It makes you think with this much extra income. So the UFC is getting $1 billion a year extra from Paramount. $1 billion extra, not counting the other ways they're gonna make money. And I say that to say, UFC gotta, come on, UFC, pay the fighters more, man. But now that the UFC has, so UFC doesn't do any more pay-per-views. So I think it's a smart thing because pay-per-views are pretty much dying out a little bit. People got tired of paying $80, $70 once a month or something like that. So, and let's face it, NFL, NBA, a lot of these big leagues are signing deals with streaming platforms. Okay, yeah. When the contract starts next year, it hasn't started yet. When it does, it reflects some changes, larger bonuses. I hope so. I hope so, man. I hope so because at the end of the day, the fighters are the one putting their lives at risk, in danger, to entertain us. But I do hope so, and I think because right now, the NBA, the NFL, MLB, players get about 50% of the revenue, roughly. UFC fighters get about 18%, 19% of the revenue, which is not bad, but I think it should be at least 40%. Okay. ESPN Plus is still in charge of the US until January. You're jumping the gun. I know, right? I am jumping the gun. I am jumping the gun. You're right about that, right? ESPN is technically it still has had the UFC. Again, the UFC came a long way, man. Think about this, y'all. $7.7 billion for 7 years. That's a whole lot of money. That's a whole lot of money. And I care about the fighters a lot because it is not easy going to the cage, man. It is not easy fighting the best every night, and these guys get knocked out, CTE, potential CTE. Like I said earlier in my life, I used to do MMA, Muay Thai, and Jiu-Jitsu, but now I'm an acupuncture physician, and I'm trying to find ways to help former athletes who are showing signs of CTE. All right, and not just athletes, anybody in general. I try to help, but I try to focus a lot also on athletes who are showing signs of CTE, because as you know, the only way that we can diagnose CTE is when the person dies. But we can see the signs and symptoms a little bit, all right? And there's no treatment for it, but acupuncture has been known to help with the symptoms, like headaches, anxiety, depression, and in some research shows that acupuncture can probably help slow it down a little bit too. So I say that to say that I care about the fighters a lot.